Hello, folks. I'm Nick Bernardo, your host of MyGovWatch Live, the B2G Roundtable. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains here in the US, good afternoon. Good morning to those out west, and hello to anyone joining us from the far corners of the Earth or watching online in the future. Today's Wednesday, December 17th, 2025. This series is brought to you by MyGovWatch. With a curated white glove approach, MyGovWatch delivers leads in more than 200 industries at double the rate of free government tools and at a fraction of the cost of legacy websites. Big government contracts do not start with a solicitation, but all roads lead to one, and your budget for hearing about bids and RFPs does not have to be thousands of dollars per year. Start your 14-day trial today. And today with us is a very special guest, Marc Morgenthaler of Ocelot. Ocelot. I always struggle with that one, Marc. It's a cat, right?
It is. It's a South American jungle cat. Yeah,
And the correct pronunciation is Ocelot, right?
correct.
Ocelot. Okay. And so Marc is the founder of Ocelot, and Ocelot is an AI assisted narrative analysis platform that empowers individuals, businesses, and nonprofits to recognize, resist, and convincingly communicate manipulation in news and public discourse by bridging divides and providing real-time actionable insights. Ocelot enables users to understand not only what is being said, but how and why meanings are being distorted before these agendas shape mainstream narratives. Marc, when I met you a few months ago,
Mouthful.
yeah, when I met you a few months ago, I will just admit it took me 10 minutes before I knew what we were even talking about when you told me what you do.
That says I don't really have my elevator pitch down.
No, it just says that it's the 21st century, and I just just as a preview for the audience members with us today, we are going to take a lot of your questions about GovCon, but we're going to sort of interview Marc about his tool, and I like to throw people curveballs on these sessions, and so it's that time of year. Well, which holiday are we celebrating this month, Marc, and what are your plans?
Yeah, so Christmas, right? I'm ahead of schedule. My
Okay.
planning is, I mean, I was good to go Thanksgiving, largely because usually we host Thanksgiving, and my lady has a very large family. So last year's Thanksgiving was 27 people. We passed it on for at least 1 year, so I've been able to get ahead on Christmas.
Well, I wish I felt like I were ahead. My teenage sons and I will be heading off to the city, meaning New York City. Might say the city if I went to Philadelphia, just down the road from us here in New Jersey. But we're headed to the city this coming weekend, and suffice it to say that my wife and daughter, who will not be in attendance, will be the main focus of any gift buying this weekend. So I have some catching up to do. So, Marc, tell us a little bit about what your system does. And, this is mainly for me, right? But also for our audience. Just like at an eighth grade level, what does your system do?
So, the easiest way to say this is just simply from the standpoint of what our clients would get out of it, right? So, for those looking to correct, understand, and well, for those looking to correct and understand narratives, and that can really start at any level, but where I've kind of chosen to kind of focus my audience on is B2B and government. That it's a natural space. These are natural spaces because narratives, are central, right? To if a corporation, it would be narratives that your customers actually understand and how they understand it. Or if it's government, that they're geez, it's like almost narrative warfare when you get to them. Exactly how people interpret facts that are out there is hugely important to everything from just being able to govern to winning elections, etc. What we do is, in essence, provide them a level of detail never seen before, such that they can convincingly, like you read in my bio on my company, they can convincingly use what I'm giving them to change public perception in a good way, because in essence they've been, in some cases, in many cases, they've been conned in a way. They've been manipulated. So this allows my customers to do these things.
Well, it's fascinating. And I remember when we first met at the event we both attended, there might have been some real world examples of like how a corporation might use your tool, maybe around a product or a service and people's perceptions. So, like, what would be, a common use case for how like a corporation might use your product or service?
Um, Sort of so companies spend a good amount of money, PR departments, companies, et cetera, on sentiment analysis. And what sentiment analysis basically does is it tells them what their customers think of one of their products, their brand, whatever, right? This product, in essence, goes a lot deeper and a lot more complex, because not only obviously do you know what your customers are thinking, but you you know exactly why, how, to the degree that their understandings of facts, how much they've actually drifted from what the facts on their own say themselves. So, I mean, with that, I mean, think about it. Just protecting your brand, right? So, a good example would be, oh, okay, well, yeah, Budweiser. It's the biggest, most shocking event in a consumer product in recent times, right? They went from number one Bud Light beer brand for years to being completely almost knocked out of that scale, right? So they understood what was happening, but their response, their defense, showed how little they understood uh, what their audiences were hearing to any level of detail. Therefore, they couldn't truly respond to the forces that were against them, against the forces that were
Yeah,
against
and I want to ask a follow-up question about like that example too. And we're also going to talk about, I have some other questions for you. We're going to talk about how this might be transferable to government agencies, whether it be federal, state, or local, using your tool. But before I do that, I just want to tell anyone in the audience, just raise your hand if you have a question either about what we're talking about, or if you've brought some questions about government contracting to today's sessions, because what I'm going to be doing is going back and forth between sort of interviewing Marc and just taking questions from you as we do in these sessions, and as we've done in the last few years. So Katie, I see your hand up. You're coming on first. I'm going to ask Marc a follow-up question first. So Marc, with the Bud Light thing, and I know it was very controversial, and like what we try not to do in these sessions is like take sides on anything that's political or sensitive. But obviously, a lot of people were talking about Bud Light, and Dylan, I think, was the person's name. Anyway, and I think that's the right name. But does your tool also quantify the opinions? In other words, I know it helps the user organization understand what's being said, but is it able to quantify, like, this number of people seem to think this, and this is the majority opinion, and here's another opinion that's not the majority opinion, and here's a few other opinions that are not the majority opinion? Or is it
Yeah,
more
as a result of the kind of information you receive, it does that. As an aside, think of it in terms of we do quantify forms of manipulation. So, whether, claim, assumption, assertion, whatever fact, they're being distorted because of bias to sell an agenda, right? So we quantify those devices, and by quantifying those devices, we can actually visually map exactly how an entire narrative from beginning to end is drifting from where the facts alone are understood. So, even AI models, summarize, you ask it to summarize, an understanding of an article, or an entire narrative, right? You say, why do people believe, what do people believe about XYZ? It will tell you that this is why they believe it. And guess what? That actually isn't right. It's actually wrong. They actually believe it for a very different reason, and we can give you that reason and how, why, and every step. It's actually it's distanced itself from what the facts actually say on their own.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because it seems like there's never been a time in, let's call it in the media age, let's say since the early 1920s with the advent of the radio. So we're 100 years into the media or the mass media age if we're excluding newspapers and just going from like radio forward. We're in an age where there's never been a greater disconnect between perhaps what people think the truth is and what the narrative is online, for example. And I think helping stakeholders of organizations, whether they be people in government or people who run corporations, understand and sift through the wheat and the chaff, so to speak, to figure out like what do people really think about this. It's just fascinating. I'm going to bring Katie on, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about how your tool is transferable to government agencies. Katie, let's bring you on here. And I think I should be saying, if I'm not mistaken, KB, because we did speak before this session. I'll just let some of you in on it. Sometimes I might speak to some of our guests before they actually come on. I do call some people before the event to see who might show up, and KB showed up. And KB, welcome to MyGovWatch Live. Can we have your video as well? We're getting a picture. Yes, I can hear you.
Amazing. You can hear me now? We didn't hear the question.
Yes. Welcome to MyGovWatch Live, KB. And for the benefit of our audience, what do you do and where are you joining us from?
I am joining you from Miami, and I work in ad tech. I work for a company called Illumin. We are essentially the same way that you use ad tech platforms like Google for search or Meta for social. We are an ad tech platform for programmatic. So, display, native video, OTT, CTV, audio, digital home campaigns. That's us. And so we sometimes act kind of as an agency of record for some of these like RFPs and contracts and things, just kind of helping cut out the middleman and direct to source the platform. And so for me personally, relationships are such a big part of what we do, especially in marketing and advertising, that I always like to learn how we can understand or get to know who the decision makers are behind a contract, to engage with them, know what's important to them to deliver, the best possible proposal.
Yeah. And so could you phrase that as a question?
Yes. How can we uncover who the decision makers are when we see RFPs in the system or bids out?
Fantastic question. So once an RFP is on the street, something called the cone of silence comes into play. And so when the bid is on the street and there's a due date and it's looming and it's in the future, what that means is you're only able to respond to the opportunity at that point. But I think really part and parcel to your question is the idea of like, how do we get to know who these decision makers are in general? And here's the answer. There's something called the open records or FOIA process. So after a bid closes, what you're able to do and what we're able to do through the site for our users is get you a copy of the signed contract, shows you who the main decision maker was who signed the deal with the vendor, a copy of any evaluation documents that show you. Sometimes it'll say, here are 5 different people who were part of the evaluation committee. Here's what Nancy thought of it. Here's what KB thought of it. Here's what Nick thought of it. Here's what Mark thought of the vendors. And you'll see individually what did each of the decision makers think of each of the vendors. Oftentimes there will be memos that explain in great detail why they picked company A and not companies B, C, or D. And all of that is available to you through Freedom of Information Act requests. And people have us do them through the site because then they get the information, but they don't have their fingerprints on the request because a lot of time these government agencies don't want you to ask for this information, even though you're entitled to it.
Yeah. So does that happen? So I know you said obviously with the due dates and stuff. So is that information that you have to kind of wait until after, that deadline is hit to kind of understand? You can't do it during the opportunity process?
Yeah. So there's 2 kinds of government contracts, especially as it relates to bids and RFPs. There are one-off purchases where they might be doing a media buy or rebuilding a website, or they were doing a one-time campaign, and that's a one-off kind of thing. Or if it's a recurring purchase, like agency of record, like over a period of time, then there is benefit to doing the request against the prior issuance of the RFP. And so you're able to do that in between contract cycles and over time generate a large body of information about who these decision makers are, and then maybe even contact them before contract end dates come about and before the next solicitation is released, so that you can try to understand, are they happy with their current agency of record or not? So that is certainly a strategy that we recommend for our user organizations.
And is that something that's specific to MyGovWatch? That's something you guys do special, or is that something that technically, because of the Freedom Act, has to be a part of every RFP, every bid, every single type of request?
Yeah. And so the public at large is able to complete FOIA or Freedom of Information Act requests. And in your state, it's called the Sunshine Law. In New Jersey, it's called OPRA, the Open Public Records Act. So it varies by state. Anyone can take advantage of it. But here's the thing. It's time consuming. You have to follow a process. First, you have to identify the process. Then you have to follow the process. Then you have to ring their bell several times because they don't really want to fulfill the request. So you might have to email Fred a few times or call Nancy a few times. Then you have to write a check. And if they don't want to do it, they can make it difficult in any number of ways, right? We've even had examples where the government agency will say, well, for us to send you the documents, it's going to cost you $17.42, but the staff time is going to cost you $10,000 to assemble the documents. And they play games like that. And so we have ways of engaging attorneys and doing things to make them understand this is not going to go away. So you can do this yourself. And we do have users who do this themselves. But if you value your time and you don't want to have your fingerprints on the request, that's a reason to have us do it.
Perfect. Amazing. That's all I had for now. Thank you.
Yeah. And what we do on these sessions, KB, if you want to stay with us, you can. You might have a follow-up question. Or you just might want to chime in on something that someone says. So I encourage you, if you'd like to do that, you can stay on camera, go off camera, jump back in whenever you'd like.
Yeah, when I go back on camera, you'll know because I have a question. So I'll be here.
Yeah, fantastic. And you can go on mute as well until you're ready to join us again. So Marc, let's talk a little bit about how your solution may be transferable to government agencies, right? And let's just make a distinction between an administration, right? And so at the federal level, a presidential administration might have reasons for using your tool. Individual political figures might have reasons for using your tool within their congressional office. But then government agencies themselves might have reasons for using your tool. So where do you see the opportunities in government? Is it only political, or is it also at the agency level, federal, state, and local?
So this works on any body of text, right? So wherever it might exist, you're talking, anything from, a stock advertisement perspectives, all the way to, entire narratives. So in any place where there, in essence, is a conflict between what is actually believed in the larger public or group that they belong in, and reality is a customer, right? So to keep it narrow, if you were to go for the lowest hanging fruit in this case in government, sure, yeah, it would be political campaigns, because their entire job is what? To capture the middle, right? To win an election. That's how it's done. And great, those that middle is open, right? It's open to understanding the politics or the policies that they're discussing, and the situations that that our country is facing, et cetera. And then therefore they can be persuaded. So this is the single greatest product that has ever existed to do that. And why do I sound so confident in that? Well, because I focus group this backwards and forwards. It doesn't. I'm not fact checking, first off, because the biggest problem with fact checking is that in the echo chambers that we now reside in, sadly, even facts that don't agree with people's bias or current understanding, it's just not the way to go about telling somebody. They're just going to
Do you
reject
think,
it
Mark?
on face.
Do you think that people really listen to fact checkers these
Yeah,
days?
right. Exactly. That's a great. Yeah, exactly. Right. They don't. Well, sorry, I take that back. Part of the country does. There is a group that does actually believe in fact checking, and they're typically the group that actually trusts their own news media, and it's a very interesting divide. Pew Research studies show it's almost a divide on party lines. A conservative barely even trusts their own news sources, whereas on the Democrat side, um, they actually overwhelmingly trust to 80-90% numbers, um, many of their news sources. So right, so fact checking as built on top of that, they also tend to believe. Whereas a conservative, most conservatives, the studies show that they don't believe in fact checking, and it's understandable why you might not believe in a fact check, and it's the first thing I said, that they just you're not giving somebody the opportunity to think for themselves when you say no, the sky is purple, right? You have to allow people the opportunity to think for themselves. um and not to mention that the basic problems with fact checking, like that in fact they are cherry picked. The It's undereducated analysis in many cases, and the most important facts that matter. That matter in terms of why there's any argument over a fact. They're the ones that it's almost like you put it in a context of a courtroom, right? Both sides, plaintiff, defendant, they both have the exact same facts, right? That's part of how our system works. But yet they can still argue over the exact.
Yeah, and that's a really useful analogy, and
Right.
I
Yeah.
certainly didn't hear you say that when we met, but that analogy helps to frame what we're really talking about here in a way that I think is really useful. So as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about like specific use applications in federal contracting, for example, and then like maybe in local contracting. I'll just pick a local contracting example. So like, different municipalities, they might do red camera light enforcement with photos of license plates and sending people tickets. And some people, may have really strong opinions about whether or not their local government should be doing that. Do you see that as a case where like a local government, and this is really apolitical, but it's like the government agency itself is trying to figure out like what do people really think about this? Do you see that as a use case?
It depends, right? It depends if bias has distorted a narrative. So if you have if the local residents around these cameras have been fed a steady diet from, let's say, the local papers, that red light cameras are in violation of all of their rights, which I actually tend to think, that's probably way too strong of a position, meaning that they've probably been sold a little bit. So backing them out of why they believe that, if it's possible, if these narratives that kind of led them to their understanding of these red light cameras, backing them out and showing them how they actually think the way they do, yeah, this is capable of showing that, and it does work. Yeah, I mean, I've shown this to as far right and as far left groups as humanly possible, and I show them things that I know are going to trigger them based on their side, and I get, when I show them just a simple individual article, I get the rubbing of the leg, the uncomfortableness because they don't like having to agree with something that they ordinarily would have rejected. And then they look at me and they say, I can't argue with this. That's right. And that is in and of itself amazing, because any other way you attempt to kind of address something with them like this, they're hands down no, they don't even want to get in the argument about it. It becomes a fruitless debate. Which actually is another Pew Research study. I think it's 70 some percent of Americans have actually stopped talking to somebody, whether it be a family member or colleague or whatever, over fruitless debates over politics.
Yeah, I believe that in this decade, certainly I believe that. So talk to me about like when somebody sees your tool for the first time and you're actually showing them a demo of it. When is the aha moment or what are they most surprised by as far as like what your tool can do, and what is the aha moment that they have where they didn't get it and now they get it?
Um, at the article level, we'll keep it simple. A simple, what are they selling and how are they selling it? That's all that's needed. And it's literally 6 total sentences between the two.
It's distilling it down to
Yeah,
something.
yeah, because then they look at the article a very different way. Uh,
Okay.
and it's funny because then they from that change in their perspective, how they actually look at something, they actually have come back to me and told me, I actually I actually can predict what people are saying now, and it's like almost like they almost like are excited because now they know what the news source or whatever they've been looking at, they know what's going to come next because that's how it's actually structured in real life.
Well, I have another question for you, and as you sort of talk about these different issues, but I just want to encourage the audience, anyone in the audience, if you raise your hand, I'm going to bring you on. We'll answer your question as we're talking back and forth with Mark, and if KB wants to come back to us. So, if you have a question about government contracting, please raise your hand. We'll bring you on. But while you're thinking about what that question may be, I'm just going to ask Mark this one. So, how does this relate to NewsGuard? Like, have you heard of NewsGuard?
Oh God, yeah. So NewsGuard, yeah. There's a field of people trying to address the problem of misinformation in news. They're all very highly focused on news. They have media bias fact check at Fontis, Ground.News, all sides. NewsGuard is a little bit different of an entity. It formed very large partnerships with hundreds of universities, world bodies, World Health Organization, government. It's involved at different levels of our government, industry bodies, the Federation of Advertisers, online advertisers. They control about $1 trillion in global advertising annually. And the people that are on that board, the companies that are on that board are like Google, you name it, Microsoft, etc. This company, NewsGuard, goes around basically just rating an organization. So they just drop them into columns. This organization is right, this organization is left, this organization is center, right, and they do this by a sample. They only analyze a few articles of a particular company. So XYZ News, and the first thing you scratch your head and go, okay, well, how are those 5, 10 articles that they're analyzing representative of everything the company's producing in a month? And it's not. So highly suspect. And their success in getting themselves in between, advertising dollars and government actions, almost makes me scared to jump into those positions myself. So so a question to you back would be like, I'm scared of getting myself into government because I don't want to. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be used like that, because this is incredibly agnostic, my tool. This goes both ways, it cuts through the noise.
Well,
Yeah.
how does what you're doing differ from what people are saying about what NewsGuard has done in accusations around censorship, for example?
So they lean heavily on subjective ideas like factuality, right? Ownership of company, like as in the owner of a company dictates whether an organization is truthful or not. Right? That I mean that should be trusted. That's highly subjective. You could be 100% biased and also 100% right. You know what I mean? So
Sure. Yeah.
what does in essence what they're doing is quantifying bias. How does that really tell you whether a company is truthful or not, and then therefore giving it a 90% or a 50%? You know what I mean? It just doesn't work like that. But they're attempting to actually say it does. Mine, on the other hand, doesn't do that. It just simply shows you how a narrative is actually created and distorted down to the sentence level of every single article in a narrative.
It's really fascinating stuff. KB, jump right in.
I know, I feel bad. As the questions kind of come to mind with other things that are said, and then by the time I'm like, I don't know if it's as relevant to where it led, but I was just curious, as I was thinking through like the decision maker piece too, and your response. Also, how do people pick when you said that like one off versus, recurring? How do we pick a date that these contracts renew or RFPs happen? Is there an element of they always kind of occur around the same time with certain ones? How can we kind of keep them on our radar for like knowing the seasons for certain RFPs, or is it just completely random?
Yeah, I think the answer to your question lies at the buyer level. So, one of the things that I'm always telling people about government contracts is that all of the hard and fast rules of government contracting, they're really out the window. So, people will sometimes say, well, they only pick the lower bidder. That's not the lowest bidder. That's not true. Well, they only pick who they knew already before the bid came out. That's not true. So, what that leads you to ultimately is an understanding that you really need to know the dynamics of each contract. And that's not something you're going to get overnight, KB. So, over a period of time, you're going to pick out which government agencies you want to work with. You're going to do open records requests, either if you do them yourself, do them through our site, and you're going to amass a body of information. And hopefully, that is a long term play, right? Because it won't happen overnight. You will find out who makes the decisions in Los Angeles versus who makes the decisions in Cook County, Illinois. And you will find that out at the state of Florida, who makes those decisions, for the advertising of tourism in the state of Florida. And that will, all of that intelligence is at the contract level. And you can learn that through the open records request and actually see the end dates of the contracts and back out of when your sales efforts need to happen based on that.
Amazing. Perfection. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your question. Appreciate that. So, Marc, what what have I not asked you about your tool and about what you do that you wish more people would ask you about?
Oh,
I know that's a hard one.
yeah. The it's just the preponderance, just the magnitude of what everyone is focused on. Everybody has been focused on bias, 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 right? Um, Bias is a beginning. Bias is not an end. And because, like I just said, or a few minutes a second ago, was we're biased creatures, right? Because of our limited capacity, our limited memory capacity, we create stereotypes, right? And stereotypes are biases, right? So this is how we function, and therefore we fall into these guardrails, these tracks that align with our biases, because this is what we know. This is what we know works, right? Based on our experiences, and that news media therefore kind of responds to that. It works with that. So news is never going to not be biased, in that if it isn't, people won't actually view it because they want to read news within their biases. There's that segment, there's that middle, right? That's that center, between left wing voters and right wing voters. If you want to look at it from a political bias, that can be open, but typically that's that for the vast majority, that's not how it works. So I just want to I wanted to get it out there that focusing on bias is a net negative. You people keep your biases. Just be concerned with when your bias might be lacking in facts, because that's when, if somebody really wants to push their bias, that's when they actually start to try and manipulate and twist what might be a claim or assumption or something, right? Uh, that's what we should be focused on, and that's what we're focused on. And it's just interesting that almost everybody right now is only focused on bias.
Well, I'm going to ask you one more question, then we're going to have KB jump in again. To what extent could your tool be applied by the average small to medium sized business? right? Like look at MyGovWatch. There are certainly, people who write good reviews about our website and how it works. And not all of them are great, but, by and large, people give our site good reviews. But there's certainly a narrative that when people talk about our site, I'll just use a positive attribute. I'm obviously going to say something positive, but people will say, well, their onboarding process is great. And you'll see that because people reach out to you. They want to make sure you're finding the leads that you're looking for. But do you see a play for the average small business using your tool at some point, and how?
Um, Small business, I haven't put a lot of thought into, right? Because this is solving a very typically a large body problem, right? How entire groups how their opinions are shaped. And for a small business, that isn't that it's a localized customer base, right? So that isn't as much of an issue. Where I would say they might get value out of it is when all of what we do is done at scale. The Things like understanding industry, monitoring the industry, policy narratives, things like that. Disinformation campaigns. These things become very clear, far more clear than most people. Actually, most people would overlook them and never see them. With this tool, yeah, I would say a small business would use it more for their own understanding, right? Than use it as a tool to strategically make decisions.
Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough. Fair enough. KB.
When you said bias, it made me think of it. But I was just wondering, so when we were talking about the open records kind of requests and things like that, is it possible to see what the rubrics or like grading scale was for like previous contracts and how people were graded, etc., to kind of understand like the different decision makers, how, and talk about bias, but how they're going about grading things to kind of get an understanding and how to do better, maybe like the next time, if one year you don't win it, you can come back later and see, or if you're vying for a brand new one, seeing like what was done and maybe avoid some of the pitfalls of the grading.
Great question, KB. And yes, that's exactly what you should expect to see when you complete an open records request through the MyGovWatch platform. You'll see things like a table, and at the top of the table, each column will be a vendor. And then the rows going down the left-hand side will be attributes of each company. And then there might be an overall table with companies at the top and attributes on the left where the numbers are aggregated. And then you might have one for each of 4 evaluators so you can see what each of 4 people thought of each bidder individually, and then it rolls up into a single score. Often you'll see subjective things like this one doesn't have an office in Florida, no good. Or you'll see another one that might say, this one forgot to include an acknowledgement of this form, so they were disqualified. So it's not only strategic, like if you review 10 different opportunities and see why you lost, then you get a strategic view of why you're not winning, but it's also extremely tactical and practical because you could see, oh, well, we lost this one because, we didn't submit a form. And somebody's probably going to get in trouble at that point, but you're going to know why you lost that particular opportunity.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. I'll say it sounds like the open record thing is going to be my new best friend. So amazing.
It's one of my favorite topics because it's such a massively important source of competitive intelligence in government contracting.
Yeah, thank gosh for the Freedom Act.
So, I guess I'll just say to the rest of the audience out there, now would be the time to raise your hand if you have additional questions. Certainly, Marc and I may continue and go on ad nauseum about the way narratives are shaped online and in the media. But if you have a question, now would be the time to raise your hand. Typically, these sessions can go anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. We're just coming up on 45 minutes. It is December. These sessions tend to be the December session tends to have relatively fewer people, which means you have our undivided attention. So if you have a question about government contracting, please raise your hand. Marc, Additional thoughts, like what else is happening in your world, and what's news and what's exciting?
Yeah. So, as you know from when we met a while back, I'm I'm beyond early stage, but I'm slowly progressing, right? It's always about money, you know. So always seeking the investor, and it's at times it's always like a chicken egg, right? I've definitely been at the egg stage for a while, trying to kind of get over that hump, be able to show enough, right, to prove the endeavor. But recently, I just brought on a partner who is wow, he kind of he's beyond me in his thinking, but he's an AI engineer, and we are now really making some tremendous progress because well, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which way you look at it, LLMs, while we need them to do what we do, they their training data just it doesn't allow us to do this at scale. So we're having to create what they call huge training databases of our personal, so that the models work the way we need them. And I'm very excited because I've been kind of stuck in this rut knowing I needed that, and I haven't had the structure to actually start filling those databases. But now we're there, and I'm like a kid in the candy store because, as you know, this is sort of my passion project. I'm not. I didn't get to this by wanting money. I got to this because it drives me nuts. Like I'm sure it drives a lot of Americans nuts. How stories are misconstrued.
Yeah, it's really interesting when I think about, especially you mentioned you have a new partner, and this person is sort of AI capable and has expertise in AI. It's like you have the peanut butter and they're the chocolate, and there's a lot of people in the world of AI these days who are simply looking for a use case, and you have a perfect use case for how to apply those skills. And we're doing some things, and we're talking to different people about partnering with our organization, and it seems like there are more of those people and fewer of us, meaning it's easier to find people that know something about AI and how to make it work. It's harder to find a practical place to apply it to create value. And I wonder what you think of that. Meaning
um,
we're more in demand than some of the AI folks.
you think?
Only because,
Did,
yeah,
did you
only
did you see
because,
what that one guy who got hired at Facebook is getting?
well, nobody's
He's like
competing with
280 something million.
yeah. Well, and here's what I would say: there's always someone at the top of that pyramid, but there's a million people in this economy who have some skills and are looking for a place to park them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest trick, right? Like, what skill sets, do I not need the motivation of money or whatever to get behind, right? That I just want to do all day long.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, we have Raul joining us, and Raul hopefully has a question. Welcome,
Yes.
Raul. Welcome to
Hi.
my Watch Live. What do you do, and where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from Las Vegas, Nevada, and I represent a company that's really a novice in attempting to get into the game of bidding on business with the government. We're very much new at this. Our company does aerial imagery. We do remote sensing for agriculture, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. And we're trying to expand into other areas, including wildfire risk mitigation and things like that. So we're trying to find the right niche, the right opportunities, and the right vehicle to be able to accomplish that mission, to get involved. What we've been advised so far, my question really is more about since we're so unknown, and most RFPs I've looked at ask for your history, your experience, where you've done the work before. Um, we often look at that as really a weakness, whether we should be partnering with a larger entity as a subcontractor or if you have other suggestions. So that's kind of what I'm looking. I'm looking for you to educate us about how we can approach this.
So I think if I'm hearing you right, the question is, what's the fastest and easiest way to get into the GovCon game?
Exactly.
Okay. The good news is there's more than one way. The bad news is it's impossible to know at this stage which one would work best and most efficiently for you. However, let me just say some things and they may help you figure out what to do next. So how long has your company been operating?
23 years.
Okay. How long have you been involved with drones?
We use Cessna aircraft, which makes us unique. We actually fly at 100 miles an hour at 7,000 feet, and we can accomplish a level of detail of data down to 15 centimeters of accuracy. So
Okay,
it's quite involved.
You've been in the flying business a long time.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been in the unmanned flying business?
Well, we can do drones, but that's not our primary mission. Our primary mission has been aircraft.
Okay, so you're trying to make a leap, but it's not that big of a leap. Do you agree?
Right.
Yeah. So, do you have, I'm sure you have a lot of customers you've done business with over the years. You must have some that would trust you to do something with an unmanned vehicle.
Sure.
Okay, so have you done any of that work yet?
Yes.
Okay, so you have references who can attest to the fact that you've done things with unmanned vehicles.
Correct.
Okay, so here's what I would suggest to you. On MyGovWatch, we have 205 categories. One of them is around aviation. Another one is around drones and unmanned vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of activity around unmanned vehicles happening nationwide, not just federally, but also state and local. They're doing things like you say around wildfire mitigation. We had somebody sign up at one point who may even still be using the site who wants to wash windows using drones, like of skyscrapers. More power to you. I would say this. I would be looking for a source of bids and RFPs, whether it be at MyGovWatch or another of our competitors, hopefully use ours, and look for those opportunities. And even if it's not exactly what you want to do, maybe the opportunity is too small or it's not quite what you're looking to do with drones or unmanned vehicles. If it seems like something that you would be capable of doing, even if it's not the ideal thing, bid on it anyway. Because once you have a toehold in government contracting, it's a very logical progression. So you might bid on a contract with a county in your part of the country, and it might have to do with doing some kind of aerial surveillance around zoning or planning or something. And it might be like a small contract. You might not be super excited about it, but now you have a county reference. So now when the state contract comes out, you can say you've done government work. And then you might pick off something at the state level, right? And again, it may be something small or it's not quite what you're looking to do long term. But as soon as you have one or two of these, especially in an emergent market like yours, once you have one or two, there's no getting you out because you now have what's called past performance, which is a very important thing in government contracting. So I always use this joke. I tell this joke. It's like, there was a guy who lays in bed every night and he prays to God and he says, please, God, let me win the lottery. And he went on for months and months praying, please, God, let me win the lottery. And then all of a sudden there was a voice from the heavens. Why don't you buy a ticket? Right. And so when you respond to an RFP, you're buying a ticket to win the lottery. And that is one way of getting in, but it's very easy to get the leads through a site like ours. So that's something that I would strongly encourage you to do. Follow-up questions.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying it's important to bid, not necessarily to win the bid.
It's important to win. So let me say it a different way.
Okay.
One way of winning government contracts is to sell a government agency on the fact that they need a solution that they haven't thought of yet, right? Well, you need wildfire mitigation. Well, we haven't, it's not in the budget. Now you have to sell them that over a period of a year or two. It's another thing where they already know they have that need, and maybe it's not exactly wildfire mitigation, but it's something involving drones, and they're announcing they have that need, and you could just bid on it. So what I'm saying is there's multiple paths to success. One of them is bidding on contracts. Another is trying to pre-sell specific types of decision makers in government on the type of activity you would like to perform with drones. But if they themselves haven't identified the need yet, now they have to go through their whole budgeting process to build it into a fiscal year, which won't be this one, it'll be a future one.
So follow-up question then would be, is there an advantage for us to be a subcontractor to somebody who has already been recognized in the past?
Yes, there are advantages and disadvantages to that. So I'm trying to think of how that would work with drones. Are you saying that it would be potentially a company that does wildfire mitigation, but with boots on the ground where they don't have the aerial piece?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, absolutely, 1,000%. And I know that there are brush clearing contracts in our system. So as another way of getting in, you would be looking for the brush clearing contracts in our system, creating fire lanes and clearing out undergrowth, and pitching that to those organizations. Like, why don't you include me as a part of your bid, and make it impossible for them to say no? And right, so you can do something like as a loss leader, and now they're a reference, right? And now you can then take that experience and then go to the other counties in that state and say, look, we're already doing it in this county as a subcontractor, and look at the benefit we've provided. And now you can use that subcontracting experience as actual past performance in government contracting, and pre-sell some other decision makers in that state or in that part of the country. So yes, I do agree with you that subcontracting is absolutely a play for you.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think we put this in our marketing, and I'll just mention it. Anybody who participates with a question on today's session, it's a 2-week free trial on MyGovWatch. When you just go to the site, it says 2 weeks. Once you've asked a question on this session, if you start and finish a sign up this week, we will bump that out to 30 days. So you basically have to the middle of January to play around with the system before the credit card on file would be charged.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for joining, Raul, and appreciate your question. And let's just see if we have other questions from others. KB is hanging out back there. Maybe she has another one. Maybe she doesn't.
No, I was just gonna say thank you guys so much. This has been so informative, and I'm excited yet to learn more about the platform and MyGovWatch. So I just wanted to say great job. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, KB, thank you. And I know we will be in touch about everything we've been emailing about.
Yep.
So I'm just going to stop there and say thank you very much for joining us, KB and Raul. And Mark, any parting thoughts? Because I never try to force these sessions to be an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half. If they die organically, a natural death, that's okay too, right? And if people run out of questions, that tends to be when we stop the session. So like going once, going twice, anyone in the audience who hasn't been heard yet, please raise your hand now. I'm just going to talk to Mark for a moment or two, and then we'll probably wrap it up if there are not other questions. So Mark, parting thoughts about all this. Do you think government is a market that you want to be in, or do you think that, that's more of a longer term play?
I actually have a few contacts down there, down in DC. And now that I'm much further along and really have something significant to show, I am testing the waters. I know the past two administrations, this administration now and the previous, they both have had efforts in the game of truth, right? The White House just actually released theirs a few weeks ago. It's exposing media bias, right? Again, focused on bias. And then the previous administration, I can't remember what the critics were calling it, but it was something like the truth something. the truth in oh God, I can't remember it now. But anyway, it seems government wants to have an effort of some kind that kind of weeds through what we all feel, but can't put our finger on when it comes to this problem, misinformation. So it makes sense for me to get there. My question actually to you at this point would be like, you know, you hear of the efforts, but you only hear of them at the very highest level. It's coming out of the White House both times, past administration and this one. So, I mean, short of picking up the phone and calling the White House, who am I actually, where do you think? What do you think?
And so I'm assuming for the purposes of this conversation, we're really talking federal only.
Well, federal, state, yeah. I mean, it works the same way, right?
Well, right, but
state,
but
yeah,
I would think that numbers being what they are, all things being equal, the federal government is probably going to have larger budgets than a local government or even a state government for something like this. So I want to encourage you to look into something called the micro purchase threshold.
Hmm.
And so that's a federal term of art. Basically, if the government is spending under $15,000 on something, they have a lot more flexibility than if they are spending over $15,000 on something. So that's something you should look into, the micro purchase threshold. Another thing is a federal term of art called an unsolicited proposal, because that has a very specific meaning in the federal acquisition regulations as well. So if I were looking to sell this to the federal government, I would be looking for an agency use case. Maybe it's Homeland Security. I can think of a part of Homeland Security that needs to manage a narrative, and I'm sure you could think of one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the military. Maybe there's a branch of the military that that needs this kind of thing. And
they all have their own kind of PR arm when
yeah,
they're discussing their own domain and it's kind of interaction with the public, right?
yeah. And so I would be looking to craft something that they can very easily buy. And anything below the micro purchase threshold, it becomes a lot easier for them to buy it, because it doesn't need to be competitive if it seems like a reasonable price. And then make sure that however you're packaging it is packaged in such a way, well, that's the bronze level. And then
Right.
if there's a silver or gold later, that's fine, but you need to sell the bronze version. And that 15,000 micro purchase threshold is definitely something that I would look into.
Yeah. Okay. I get it. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So parting thoughts, I guess we'll keep in touch. I don't think we have any other questions. So any other questions for me?
No, but I mean, I appreciate you having me on this. Great seeing your face again. I imagine that we'll be talking a lot more.
Yeah. I'm sure we look forward to it. I want to hear about what your progress is on on marketing the tool, and we can always trade contact information on others who might be looking to get involved with what we're doing as well. So appreciate your involvement, Mark. And without further ado, I'm just going to wrap it up and just say thank you, folks, for joining today's edition of MyGovWatch Live. If you want to win more government contracts for less, please start your 14-day trial at MyGovWatch.com today. You'll be glad you did. And thanks, folks. Have a good day.